Welcome to Part 2 of our exploration into global travel restrictions for American citizens. In Part 1, we covered 10 countries where Americans face significant travel restrictions or outright bans. If you missed that, you can find the link in the description. Now, in Part 2, we'll delve deeper into the top 5 countries where travel is currently prohibited or strongly discouraged for Americans in 2024. Number 1. North Korea. North Korea remains highly restricted for American travelers due to a travel ban enforced since 2017 after the detention and death of American student Otto Warmbier. The strained relationship between North Korea and the U.S. is due to North Korea's nuclear program and human rights abuses. Americans face a high risk of arbitrary arrest and severe penalties for minor infractions. Diplomatic relations are minimal, limiting consular assistance. The U.S. Department of State issues a Level 4, Do Not Travel advisory. Travel requires special validations, rarely granted and often for humanitarian purposes. With travelers under strict supervision, North Korea's isolationist policies date back to the Korean War, which ended in an armistice, leaving the peninsula technically still at war. The regime under Kim Jong-un tightly controls borders and uses propaganda to portray the U.S. as a primary adversary. North Korea is notorious for human rights violations, including forced labor camps and lack of freedom of speech. Visitors are closely monitored, with restricted movements. Few Americans who have visited describe a controlled environment with minimal local interaction. Tourist sites are curated to favor the regime, ignoring harsh realities. The death of Otto Warmbier highlights the severe risks, due to ongoing nuclear developments and lack of diplomatic progress. Lifting the travel ban is unlikely in the foreseeable future. Number 2. Iran. While not entirely banned, traveling to Iran as an American is extremely challenging. The visa process is complex, requiring Americans to travel as part of an organized tour. The relationship between Iran and the United States has been tense since the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Political disagreements, particularly over Iran's nuclear program and regional activities, have led to mutual distrust and stringent travel restrictions. American travelers, especially those with dual Iranian citizenship, risk detention and harassment. Several incidents of Americans being detained on charges of espionage or other politically motivated accusations have been reported. The U.S. Department of State advises against travel to Iran, citing the risk of arbitrary detention and limited diplomatic support. The advisory is at Level 4, Do Not Travel. Iran's geopolitical stance and strained relations with the U.S. add to the complexities and risks of traveling there. The diplomatic strain dates back to the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which led to the establishment of an Islamic Republic and the hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Since then, various issues, including Iran's nuclear ambitions and involvement in regional conflicts, have kept the two nations at odds. Iran has been criticized for human rights abuses, including the suppression of political dissent, freedom of speech, and assembly. These concerns extend to foreign visitors, who may face harsh treatment and lack of legal protections. Americans who have visited Iran often describe a beautiful and culturally rich country but emphasize the need for caution. Strict regulations govern tourists' activities, and interaction with locals is usually monitored. Given the ongoing political tensions and lack of diplomatic progress, it is unlikely that travel restrictions will ease soon. Travelers should be prepared for stringent controls and potential risks. Number 3. Syria. Syria is off limits for American travelers due to its ongoing civil war, which began in 2011 and has caused significant instability and danger. The Syrian civil war has resulted in widespread violence, with various factions, including terrorist groups, vying for control. Terrorist organizations such as ISIS operate within Syria, posing significant threats to foreigners. The U.S. Department of State has a Level 4, Do Not Travel advisory for Syria. There is no U.S. diplomatic presence, making it impossible to provide consular services to American citizens. The volatile security situation and humanitarian crisis make travel extremely dangerous. The conflict began with the 2011 Arab Spring protests, evolving into a complex war involving multiple factions and foreign interventions. The humanitarian situation has deteriorated significantly, with millions displaced and thousands killed. The war has led to severe human rights violations, including attacks on civilians, use of chemical weapons, and widespread destruction of infrastructure. Various groups, including the Syrian government and rebel factions, have been accused of committing war crimes. Given the current conflict, few travel experiences are documented. Those who have visited in the past describe a country rich in history and culture but now devastated by war. The prospects for easing travel restrictions are bleak as the conflict shows no signs of resolution. The ongoing violence and lack of a stable government makes Syria one of the most dangerous places in the world for travelers. Number 4. Libya. Libya is highly dangerous for American travelers due to ongoing conflict and political instability since the 2011 revolution that ousted Muammar Gaddafi. The country is divided among various factions and militias, leading to frequent violent clashes. Foreigners, particularly Americans, are at high risk of being kidnapped for ransom or political leverage. The U.S. Department of State has a Level 4, do not travel advisory for Libya. The lack of a stable government and pervasive violence make it extremely dangerous for travelers. There is no functioning U.S. embassy in Libya, which severely limits consular assistance. Following Gaddafi's fall, Libya plunged into chaos with multiple groups vying for power. The power vacuum led to a fractured state with competing governments in the east and west and various militias controlling different territories. The ongoing conflict has resulted in severe human rights abuses, including unlawful killings, torture, and human trafficking. The humanitarian situation is dire, with many civilians suffering from the lack of basic necessities. Travelers who have been to Libya describe a country with significant historical sites and cultural heritage but now overshadowed by violence and instability. The threat of kidnapping and violent crime is high, with foreigners often targeted. Given the current state of conflict and lack of central authority, the situation in Libya is unlikely to improve soon. Travel restrictions are expected to remain in place until there is significant political stabilization and improved security. Number 5. Yemen. Yemen is another country where Americans are strongly advised not to travel. The ongoing civil war has created a humanitarian crisis and significant security concerns. The conflict between the Yemeni government and Houthi rebels has led to widespread violence and displacement. Terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, operate within Yemen, posing a severe threat to foreigners. The U.S. Department of State has issued a Level 4, do not travel advisory for Yemen, highlighting the risks of terrorism, civil unrest, and kidnapping. Additionally, the dire humanitarian situation, including famine and disease outbreaks, makes travel to Yemen highly dangerous. Traveling can be a rewarding experience, but it's essential to be aware of the risks associated with certain destinations. For Americans, countries like North Korea, Iran, Syria, Libya, and Yemen pose significant dangers due to political tensions, conflicts, and security concerns. Always consult the latest travel advisories from the U.S. Department of State before planning any international travel. Ensuring your safety should always be the top priority, and being informed about potential travel risks is a crucial step in planning any trip abroad. That wraps up the second part of our list. Stay tuned for the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more valuable content.